Let's jump right in. If you've ever sat there staring down a blinking cursor, just completely overwhelmed by that mountain of clinical data you somehow have to turn into a polished manuscript, well, you are in exactly the right place. In this explainer, we're taking that totally daunting task of writing a final clinical report and breaking it down into a highly manageable step-by-step process. And honestly, let's start with a massive sigh of relief. Our source material points out something brilliant. Completing the final written report is actually easier if you start with a strong proposal. Think about that for a second. If you've already written a solid project proposal, half of your heavy lifting is literally already done. You're not starting from scratch here. You're just adapting, updating, and building right on top of that foundation you've already laid.
To get us across that published finish line, we're going to map this out into 4 distinct phases: pre-writing and outlining, drafting the final report, revising content and structure, and finally, polishing your writing style.
So let's kick things off with phase 1, pre-writing and outlining.
Now, to eliminate those inevitable distractions later, because let's face it, we all look for any excuse to stop writing, you absolutely need to execute this quick checklist first. Number 1, assemble your updated literature review and all your data in one spot. Number 2, go check the specific author guidelines for your target journal. And number 3, clearly pinpoint who is actually going to be reading this. Are you writing for hyper-specialists in your exact field or a broader healthcare audience? Answering that right now dictates your entire tone. But before you write a single new word, you've got to hit pause. Take a moment to reflect back on the actual clinical problem you started with. You want to ensure your outline stays perfectly aligned with your original purpose statement, so you don't end up wandering off on weird tangents later. Which brings us right into phase 2, drafting the final report. Okay, here is the ultimate repurposing shortcut, and it's basically time travel. Take the existing introduction and method sections from your proposal and literally just change the verbs from future tense to past tense. So we will implement simply becomes we implemented. Boom. Just like that, major sections of your final report are already drafted. With those old sections adapted, you really only have to write 2 brand new sections from scratch. First up, the results. This is where you stick strictly to the organized data. We're talking just the facts, clearly presented in your text and tables with absolutely no commentary. Then, second is the discussion. This is the fun part where you finally get to interpret what it all means. It's your so what perspective explaining the real-world implications of your findings for education, practice, or future research. And our source recommends using your final abstract as a super powerful checklist. Remember, the abstract is the most read document of your entire project. If you can clearly and concisely summarize your background, methods, results, and implications in just 100 to 150 words, well then, you know your overall narrative is rock solid. Moving right along to phase 3, revising content and structure. Now hold on. Before you change a single word of your draft, the text highly advises taking a deliberate retreat from active writing. It's what we call the power of the pause. You literally need to rest your mind, step completely away from the computer, and come back a few days later. This lets you return with fresh, objective eyes, which essentially transforms you from the author into the editor. As you dive into that structural review, you have to ask yourself this critical question. Is your purpose undeniably clear from the very first introduction all the way to the end? You want to make absolutely sure your main concepts trace perfectly throughout the whole manuscript. Every single paragraph has to serve that main purpose without any wandering or distracting tangents. Next, you've got to ruthlessly interrogate your visuals. Ask yourself, are your tables and figures absolutely essential? Tables should present specific data that supplements your text, not just duplicate it. If a table repeats exactly what you just wrote in the paragraph right above it, one of them has to go. No exceptions. The goal here is to use an editor's checklist to become your own toughest peer reviewer. Look for and fill in any missing background evidence. Be super bold about cutting out repetitive ideas, double-check the accuracy of your statistics, and make absolutely sure your logical transitions are seamlessly guiding the reader from point A to point B. And that brings us to our final step, phase 4, polishing your writing style.
Starting at the paragraph level, make sure every single sentence shares a common theme, and use what experts call meta-discourse, those super helpful signposting words like first, second, or finally, to really guide the reader through your logic. Oh, and here's a great rule of thumb from our sources. Do not be afraid to break up any paragraph that drags on for more than a single double-spaced page. Readers desperately need those visual breaks to actually absorb the information.
Now let's zoom in and see how this works at the sentence level. Editors absolutely prefer the active voice because it puts the main character and their action right up front. So, instead of the passive, clunky, the clinical guidelines were developed by the interdisciplinary team, swap it to the active, the interdisciplinary team developed the clinical guidelines. See the difference? It's shorter, it has more energy, and it keeps the reader totally engaged. Down at the word level, it is time to be totally relentless. Cut out all those vague approximations and that clunky jargon. Instead of saying something broad like a large increase, use precise numbers like increased by 35%. Instead of investigation was completed, use concrete action verbs like we reviewed the data. And always write out your shorthand jargon. Say laboratory values instead of just lab. These might seem like micro choices, but they instantly elevate your scholarly tone. So, by following these precise phases, from setting up your environment to time traveling your verb tenses, right down to a surgical structural polish, you haven't just written a paper. You've systematically built a highly compelling report. So here's the final question we'll leave you with. Is your manuscript just going to sit there gathering dust on a hard drive, or is it actually ready to go out and change clinical practice? Your audience is waiting. Thanks for joining this explainer, and happy writing.